Here is an author in their element, having some fun with their craft, delivering some of the best combat scenes I've read lately.
That never wanders far from my mind.
I think that this might be one of the single best representations of dragons that I've read in the fantasy genre.
This book is a dark, fascinating, disgusting, wonderful, nauseating, intriguing, effed up, heartfelt, brutal character study
that recaptures the magic of far-flung galaxies, grand ideas, and more.
There's so much this book gets right. Like any good map, you're aware of the destination it's leading you towards, but the way it takes you there is very pretty indeed.
An all-consuming dreamscape, the likes of Poe Morpheus.
It's a neo-retro futuristic fest called Alien Menace's Gunslinger Goes Hard.
Hello everyone, and thank you for tuning in to TBRCon and this, the LitRPG progression fantasy panel. And also it's Burns night, would you believe? So happy birthday. Birthday? Was it his birthday, Robbie Burns? I don't know, but happy Burns night all the same. I have a beard, I like books, I'm Tom Bookbeard, I'm going to be your moderator today. I am joined by 5 awesome authors, and I can't wait to chat to them about these genres. We'll just go around the panel, guys, introduce yourselves, and then we'll get into it. Bringing the first up is Casualfarmer.
Yes, I am Casualfarmer. I'm the author of Beware of Chicken and the resident Canadian here.
Looking good, Casual.
As you can see, my face is only the prettiest thing.
The chicken actually does write the books, I think we're finding out. And Abby Goldsmith is with us as well.
Yeah, Abby Goldsmith, author of the Torth series, and I've got book 1 right here. Starts with Majority, and I'm in Texas.
And going around to Shirtaloon.
G'day, I'm Shirt, Travis Deverill. I write He Who Fights with Monsters. I'm Australian because apparently the country matters when we all sell our books online constantly. And that's about it. I don't have a book to hold up. Well, I do. I just couldn't be bothered going and getting one.
Completely fair enough. There is quite a few of yours, so you'd be sport for choice of which one to hold up, to be fair. We have another Travis joining us, Travis Riddle.
Yes, I'm Travis Riddle, author of the Jekua series. Book 1 is On Lavender Tides, and I'm also in Texas.
And last but by no means least, we have Matt Dinniman with us as well.
Hey guys, yeah, I'm Matt Dinniman. I write Dungeon Crawler Carl. The most I happen to have it here. The most recent book is The Eye of the Bedlam Bride. 6 books so far. And I just got to say that intro was like way cooler than I was expecting. So now I feel like obligated to like take this seriously and stuff. So.
I do not. I was just hearing all those things, and I thought we could have a LitRPG one where someone's strength just went up by 7.
I mean, I'm perfectly happy to award each of you XP as we're going through and answering the questions. Completely fine. And that does bring us on to our first question. And I think, look, we got all 5 of you here. Be a shame if we didn't ask what actually led you all to write in your genre. So if you could each say a bit about how you came to write RPG, progression, fantasy. And again, Casual, do you want to start us off?
Well, mine's fun. It's severe and chronic illness. So, yes, I was feeling absolutely terrible. Actually, at some point, I thought I was going to die, and I just decided, you know what, I'm going to write something very happy-go-lucky. So that's my entire thing.
That's really interesting you mentioned that, actually, Casual, because the whole theme of Beware of Chicken is that sort of isekai. Like, Jin leaves the mortal world and is like reborn as this cultivator, this farmer. I had no idea that was sort of the inspiration for you. That's fascinating, and what a way to deal with the chronic illness is to write a series like yours. That is incredible.
It was something nice that I wanted to read, so I just went for it.
Fantastic. And Abby, how did you get into writing progression fantasy?
Well, so I've always just loved epic series, like epic fantasy, like large scale space opera and all that. And LitRPG was not on my radar a whole lot, and I was aiming for Big Five. But so Big Five doesn't seem all that interested in it, to be honest. So I started to just kind of get more and more into the web serial world. I read Worm, and I just, superpowers, a whole bunch of superhero stuff, and I started to get hooked on web serials instead. Yep.
I do find it quite surprising Big Five isn't interested in these genres, given, well, I'm sure all of you have seen that there's definitely an audience out there. Some of the numbers you guys are posting is insane. I mean, do you ever actually see that changing, Abby, or?
It might change. I don't know. I mean, I have no idea, but I agree. It's a little weird.
I suppose at least all of you are ahead of the curves. If Big Five do catch up, you're already there. You've already done it. Like, we've done it RPG and prog fantasy. We know what we're doing. You guys are way too late. Maybe that's more power to the reader as well. And Shirtaloon, you've got quite a few books behind you at this stage. What got you?
Yeah, I'm working on book 11. Yeah, I'm just about to finish book 11. Book 10 came out last year at some stage. End of November, I think. So yeah, there's a few that have come out. I started off. I was actually studying creative writing at uni, and I was, doing a lot more sort of literary style work. And then at some point I realized I graduated, I was doing some postgraduate work, at which point I realized I was just stalling. Like, I was at the point where it's like, you got to do this to see, you're basically chickening out. You've got to, go out and write a book. At which point, I was sitting there deciding, do I go more of an epic fantasy route, try to get, traditional publication, or do I go for more web serial stuff? And I wanted to write something profoundly silly and odd, and that just didn't fit the traditional fiction mold. So yeah, I jumped into web serials on Royal Road, and it went surprisingly well.
Fantastic. And Travis, how about yourself?
So I was like a little familiar with the progression subgenre just from reading. I haven't read like a ton in the genre actually, but I dabbled in it a little bit, and then unrelated to that, I was kind of thinking about the fact that Pokemon is like the biggest franchise in the world, and like so many people grew up with it who are like my age now, like in their 30s. And I thought it was weird that like there's really not much media like inspired specifically by that in literature or really anywhere. And so I thought it might be fun to write a series that's like Pokemon, but with like real characters and like a real storyline. And so then I also kind of realized that, hey, like progression fantasy is kind of like the perfect genre for a story like that, because it's all about the progression of like getting more monsters and then like training those monsters up to learn new moves or to like evolve or whatever. So it just happened that I don't know, it was a type of story I was interested in writing already, and it seemed like a perfect marriage with that genre.
Yeah, I remember being a little kid and my friend had an emulator. We were playing Pokemon Red and Blue on his computer. Like, when you blow these Game Boy games up on a proper monitor, you just can't see anything. But I love how you've taken that sort of that childhood nostalgia. I think you all do this as well in your work, and translated that into this sort of format. I think is an incredible skill.
My favorite piece of childhood nostalgia with Pokemon Red is I got it as a birthday gift, when it came out when I was like 6 or 7 or something. I never played anything like that before. and I had it on my Game Boy, and I was just in like the main character's house, like where you literally start the game. And I was just walking around. I was some dumb little kid, and I did not understand that like the little discolored tile was meant to represent like this is the exit of the house, so you can leave the house. And so it was just me and like 5 of my friends huddled around the Game Boy, all of us trying to figure out like how the hell do you like go farther in this game. I was just walking around the house for like 45 minutes. I think by accident I finally left the house.
Yeah, what's the fuss about this game again? Then nothing happens.
That's kind of how life is too. You know, you're stumbling around. You don't know where the hell you're supposed to be going.
Well, I mean, yeah. Moving on to you, Matt. I mean, how did you stumble into the genre yourself, especially Dungeon Crawler Carl?
My story is kind of similar to Shirtaloon's, where I've wanted to be a writer my whole life, and when I went to college, one of my several majors for a while was creative writing, and I went through the whole program. I took several of the classes, and I wrote lots of like more literary bent short stories. I won a fancy award, and then no one ever read any of my work because it's literary fiction. And at the same time, I grew up as like a kid that was obsessed with 80s horror movies. I would go to the video stores and rent out all the horror movies they had, and at the same time I read out the entire library of horror novels. And so I always knew that I wanted to be a horror author. And that's what I consider myself now, even though people see Dungeon Crawler Carl as this big silly thing. It's a horror novel at its core, but it's a big goofy gonzo 80s style one, and that's what I've always wanted to do. And it was Dungeon Crawler Carl's far from my first book, but it was the first book I wrote that anybody actually read. And that's where I am.
It's interesting to hear you talk about that horror influence, and I think with this particular genre, be it LitRPG or progression fantasy, one of the things that works for me as a reader is all of your books have that Tetris moment. So whether it's horror influences or web novels or Pokemon or cultivation, it's that moment where you realize, holy shit, I'm addicted to this, and I need to open the next loot box. I need to collect the next monster. I need to find out what's going to happen when the character levels up. How do you all harness that in your writing, and what have been the major influence for you as you've been putting your series together? We'll start with Casual again, go clockwise unless everyone else wants to jump in.
So, I guess because mine isn't really like more lit RPG, so like the thing with the Word of Chicken is that it kind of gets away from most of the like progression fantasy aspect of Xianxia, because normally it's like I have cultivated this spiritual horror where my abilities have risen by this amount of level. Well, in Word of Chicken kind of like specifically avoids that. But as for the farm itself is continuously growing, and like one of the things that we do in the start of every one of the books is we put a picture of the farm, and like we add like the buildings and the characters and stuff that have joined the farm. So like in the first picture, it's the main character staring at a completely bare spot of land with his hands on his hips. In the next book, he's got like his wife and his friends, and he's got a house on the island in the middle of the thing, and like that, and yeah, it's just kind of like, I guess, the slow kind of more slow build up. How it's not like sudden spikes in power. It's more just continuously trucking along, I guess is the way that is.
But there is that progression there as well, that Jin at the start of the series, in many ways he just decides to become a farmer because it's one of the only courses of action available to him. And for me, reading your books, Casual, was what's he going to do next? And I think one of my favorite aspects of Beware of Chicken was when Jin makes his own maple syrup. And I didn't realize you were Canadian, but it's that sort of that joy and that pride he has, which makes me want to read on and find out, well, what's he going to turn his hand to next? And then, of course, you get all the animals on the farm who start their own cultivation journeys. I also love how you work in all the pop culture references as well. I've got a toddler, so the fact that one of the pigs on the farm is called Peepa is fantastic. I mean, what challenges do you have to bring that into your writing when you're putting Beware of Chicken together?
I guess a lot of it is just trying not to make it boring, because like that's the one thing I fear. It's like, because it's primarily slice of life, so you don't want things to get like bogged down and stuff. So the biggest thing is kind of like using the humor and the fantastical elements grounded with kind of like what I've done, because again, I'm Canadian. I actually have done the maple syrup thing. So it's like most of the stuff, a lot of the stuff that Jin has done, I have done, and what's it called, and I kind of like drawn on the experience of like making the biggest snowman that you can. Like, think of your favorite childhood memory and then scaled up to 11 because these people are superhuman. It's kind of the thing that I like doing. So like the biggest snowman is bigger than his house and stuff like that. And as for the pop culture references, I think Canada's slightly weird for that, because we've got so much influence from the United States, but then we've also got so much influence from Britain and stuff. So like the fox's name, Basil Brush, is from a British puppet show. And like in places in Canada, it often feels like we're 10 years behind everybody else, which is another thing. So like we're getting so like the main character Jane is supposed to be 19, but he's still like getting references from like 10 plus years ago because of the fact that lots of places in Canada seem almost stuck in time.
Yeah, I remember driving my car, listening to the audiobook of Beware of Chicken and hearing Travis Baldry say Basil Bushy. And I just lost it. I grew up with Basil Brush. Like, that was on TV when I was a kid. I was like, what is this? This is fantastic. It's just, I think that's exactly why this genre is so appealing to me, is it can capture that essence of childhood. And this is exactly the point you were making earlier, Travis, with, you struggling to leave the first room in Pokemon. No, that's fantastic. And Abby, what's your own Tetris moment then?
Well, you mean for like building up character and keep it compelling. I mean, I've always liked kind of larger than life characters, and I do that. I just like to kind of have a lot of like really sharp interpersonal power dynamics going on, where there's a lot of rise and fall between the secondary characters, and I like to have really overpowered villains, which some readers don't like, apparently, but I just kind of like, I want to give my heroes like the biggest, most ridiculous obstacle possible. So, Galactic Empire, that's kind of Borg-like and can't be defeated and all that. So I just like to throw as much as possible at the characters.
Yeah, especially when the big bads in your series are telepathic. So it's incredibly hard to hide things from them. And Shirtaloon, how about yourself? How have you found your moment with your writing?
I think one of the key elements that keeps people coming back to my series is sort of the friendships between the central characters, the way they bounce off each other. Because I try to make that feel, very authentic and compelling, and it's something I play around with a lot. Like, the sort of darkest period of the series is when the main character's off by himself. He doesn't have his support network, and he starts losing his shit. And then, goes through a recovery process. So I think that's a large element of what pulls through people through my series. It's sort of those developing character relationships that sort of makes the sort of wholesome core around which all the, it's a relatable center for a series full of very, silly, outlandish things and vast cosmic power.
There's definitely that dark element to the latter books in your series, and I agree. When you first set up the world and the mechanics, then in a way it eases the reader in, and it allows you to then build that tension, build that darkness. And I think that's why the series is on to its 11th book, that it is a captivating thing for us readers to follow along. When I first got into this entire genre, I started with your book, Matt, Dungeon Crawler Carl, the first book. And a friend of mine is really into audiobooks, so I said, look, you love video games, you really enjoy this book. And he said, yeah, there's one I'm listening to like that at the moment. It's the Australian one. I was like, I think I know the one you mean. Is it He Who Fights with Monsters? Yeah, that's the one. So yeah, there's definitely that association there. And Travis, yeah, you've talked about struggling to leave the first, the player character's house in Pokemon. I mean, how do you bring in those video game elements, that reader addiction, into your own writing? How would you harness that?
Well, the kind of thrust of the story is that it follows two best friends who grew up together, and one of them, for her, I guess her job basically is going on a pilgrimage across this tropical archipelago that they live on, and the other main character, who's the summoner, is basically like her escort and her protection as she goes across these islands. And so I think the sort of addictive, compelling element of it is what is addictive inherently in the Pokemon games, which is you're seeing a lot of different locales as you travel, and in all those locales are different and unique types of monsters. So it's always exciting to see what kind of monsters are crawling around this new place, seeing if the character will catch them or not, and then learning what their moveset is basically. And also I think I approach the big battles, whether it's against stuff in the wild or other summoners, kind of puzzles, I guess, where it's something for the main character to solve. And so it's kind of fun on my end to kind of compare these two different movesets and see how I can use the main character's set of skills with his 4 monsters that he has equipped basically, to solve the problem of the other opponent monster. Yeah, and I think that's probably the most satisfying part for a reader also, is seeing these things set up throughout the book, while you're learning about the monster and what different moves it has, and then finally seeing it put to good use and result in a victory. Usually, sometimes.
I think that's another inherent challenge when you are writing in this sort of genre. Pokemon's a great example. Those of us who've played the games, especially as kids, so much of the game is monotony. It's taking your Pokemon and grinding and grinding and grinding, and you can't write that and make it enjoyable. And I think that's where some authors can really struggle when writing in this sort of a way. So it's interesting to hear you managed to capture, the nostalgic essence of that and the enjoyable essence in that. Yeah, we did it to see the progression, but to avoid that trap of making very repetitive, bland read, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I think that keeps it fresh for me too, swap, because you can only have 4 monsters equipped at a time in this world. So that kind of keeps it fresh for me as well, as the characters basically changing out their team throughout the books. And also it feels a little more true to the Pokemon series for me anyway, because sometimes he'll capture a monster in the book that I think is cool, and I'm planning on maybe using it, and then as I continue to write, I realize, you know what, I don't actually have a use for this thing, and he just never uses it again, which is kind of my experience playing the games also. But hopefully it's still fun to see him grow his collection of monsters.
I know exactly what you mean there. That shame when you have your poor forgotten old Pokemon from several hours ago. And Matt, you briefly mentioned earlier that one of your inspirations was that gore horror from the 80s. I mean, how did you translate that all into Dungeon Crawler Carl, and indeed your other series that you've got on the go?
Well, for me, everything I write, I subscribe to the whole notion of urgency, how important urgency is to the writing. Every single scene, there should be like, the floor should be like this. They should always be sliding in a direction. That's why I'm so impressed with guys like Casualfarmer who write really, really compelling fiction that's more slice of life. And I can never do that because I don't even understand how to do that. But for me, it's always, people are always rolling, catching up speed towards a known or unknown, but they know it's their destination. And that's how LitRPG and progression fantasy in general has kind of like the cheat built in, just by the nature of what it is, where like, you know, the numbers go up and people want to see what happens next. As a writer, I'm a complete pantser. I make it all up as I go along. So I want to know, if I don't care what happens next, then I know I'm doing it incorrectly. So that Tetris moment, that moment that keeps you playing, keeps being compelling. What's going to happen next? What's going to happen next? What's going to happen next? And I just try to keep that always going and all in at once. And that's just my style.
Mm-hmm. That's a fascinating image, that slope where all the characters are moving down. There are those moments in Dungeon Crawler Carl where, do you remember the game Killer Instinct on the Super Nintendo? Years and years back. It's a bit like that in terms of the combat, the fighting, but it's all for a purpose. They're in that sort of murder ball, that final game show element, and it's you analyzing how people would respond. I mean, yes, it's video gaming, it's like a reality TV show on this universal scale, but there's still human emotions. There's characters dying and how that impacts everyone around them. And again, I see this in all of your work, is taking that element of human emotion and combining it with the nostalgia, with that need to read on, to play on. It's fascinating to me. And that does lead me on to my next question, and I want to open this out to all of you. I'll stop picking on you one by one. What are the key ingredients for all of you in your own genre, in your own work, that make your story as powerful as it is?
Well, I think for me, you just kind of touched on that. A lot of, like, you look at a movie like, say, Ace Ventura, where it's kind of a normal, it's not really a normal situation, but the main character is crazy and nuts. And I like to do it the other way around. I mean, other than, the talking cat and stuff. But Carl treats everything like a normal person would, even though everything that's going on around him is absolutely batshit insane crazy, because the people that are running this world are trying to make it as crazy and entertaining as possible. So that I think, again, it lends itself to urgency. Is this scene urgent? I always ask myself that. Is there a compelling reason for the person to finish this sentence? Not just the paragraph, not just the page. And that's my philosophy for every word I write. And I go over every sentence over and over and over again, which I don't recommend, but that's what I do.
And was this your own editor before it even goes over to the editor?
Yeah. I think what I would say, and that ties in with what both of y'all were saying, because in all of my books, including the Jekua series, I have a lot of slice of life moments in there as well. A lot of people just describe them as slice of life books anyway. And so I think for me, like in those like slice of life chapters, what I maybe like think of that downward slope is like the emotional stakes of whatever's happening in those moments, like the conversations between the characters, whether it's like a relationship developing or like a relationship fracturing, as it sometimes happens. And I think that those emotional moments and all the interpersonal dynamics are, I think, kind of the key to what I wanted to accomplish with the series, which, as I said at the beginning, like I wanted to make a Pokemon story, but like with actual, like, well-rounded characters and like a real storyline where you actually care about what's happening, and it's not just like, oh, we're going to this next place now, and now we're going to the next place. So yeah.
Mm. And after you.
Sorry, yeah, no, I completely agree about the value of personal interplay between the characters. I think compelling characters make for compelling story. They're not the only ingredient, but if you've got a bunch of dull people wandering through your fascinating world, then you're going to find yourself with readers who really wish they were just following peripheral characters who sort of wander by and seem interesting. But I think there's, a lot of ingredients that make it up. That's not any one thing. But it's certainly key for me. I have large amounts of dialogue in my writing style, and for that you need characters. But yeah, and I also have like slice of life sections like other Travis.
I have a hell of a lot of dialogue too.
Yeah. And I think, I really enjoy stories that are, dialogue heavy. And I think you and I have probably quite similar philosophies on how to approach things stylistically.
Yeah. The thing that I always think is, would I want to be there? Is basically what I'm thinking of when the characters are talking and when there's the slice life bits. Like, even if what's happening isn't the best for the characters, would I still want to be there and like help them or like lend my support or something to what they're currently doing? And I think the other thing I guess kind of is respecting the world, I guess would be the best thing for that, is like the people who live there. So like the main character is an isekai, but the people who live there are like smart, and not everything the main character does is something they haven't thought of before or is like super amazing or something like that.
Yeah.
It's like they've been living there their whole life. They know what's going on, and then the main character listens to that, and though he does have like 500 years more of technological advancement to draw from, he's still like, oh, okay, what I'm doing is completely wrong. I'll do it this way.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd say like I'm a little bit the opposite of Matt, where I pre-write everything, or I pre-wrote the entire series, so I do a lot of outlining. But for me, that's kind of like making sure the super geniuses and the prophets seem authentic, because if I was pantsing it, I would very quickly get lost in the weeds, I think. I've had a lot of trouble trying to pants things. So
yeah, I was a pantser for a long time, and just kept writing myself into corners. Once I started introducing some outlining, I don't do super heavy outlining, but it stops me from getting distracted and wandering away.
Yeah.
See, I would get bored as shit if I outlined. I wouldn't finish anything.
Yeah.
I used to feel the same way, but now I outline pretty heavily. But I guess what I kind of do is I do a pretty detailed outline, but then I let myself kind of improvise while I'm actually writing the chapters. And I've had like an entire important subplot in another series emerge just from me like improvising, and then I had to like go back and change the outlines that I had.
Yeah, what I end up doing all the time is I outline, okay, so these are the main points I want to hit, and however I get there, I get there. And then that leads to certain things taking a lot longer. So Beware of Chicken Book 2 and Book 3 were originally supposed to be one volume, and everything that was supposed to happen in that thing was supposed to happen in about a quarter of the time that it did.
Yeah, that sounds familiar.
That's an interesting point, actually. What has surprised you all the most writing books like this?
I mean, it does take on a life of its own, and even with the meticulous outlines, I have to go back and revise the outline a lot.
Yeah. I think what surprised me the most is exactly how many people like it. I was completely stunned. So I started on another forum, and when I started writing Border Chicken, I had no plans to monetize it, no plans to do anything with it. And I was writing on this other forum, and somebody told me, "Hey, you should put this on Royal Road. This is a really good story. More people should see it." So I ended up doing that. I didn't think much of it at the time, and by the end of the first day, it was the top 50, and then by the end of the first week, it was #1 on Royal Road. So I was like, "Is that good?"
That's okay.
I remember that. Yeah.
But yeah, it just absolutely surprised me that many people were that invested in what I considered the silly chicken story.
Yeah, it can feel like sort of especially the web serial space, but sort of progression lit RPG in general can feel invisible to anyone who's not like neck deep in it.
Yeah,
that's
like,
starting to change, but yeah,
it's starting to change. But if I'm talking to someone, it's like, "Oh, what do you write?" And I'm like, how long do I have? Fantasy. Yeah.
Yeah. See, the thing with LitRPG is that, so back when the Gamer first came out, the Korean webtoon, as soon as I read the first chapter, I was like, yeah, this is going to become super popular in like 5-10 years. And then lo and behold, it did.
We got a question in the comments a little while ago, and then you just touched upon it. Travis Shirtaloon. Zhao asked, how many web novels did you read before you started writing LitRPG and prog fantasy?
Oh God, I don't know. Like back when I had like no money whatsoever, web serials were great because they were free.
Yeah.
Which
Which
was right in my price range. But I started back when it was a lot of I got into it originally through cultivation stories, a lot of translated stuff from East Asia, and which is why there's a lot of sort of cultivation-y aspects in what I write. But I also found myself not finishing a lot of them. If there's 1,800 chapters, that can be fine if it's compelling and keeps going. But a lot of it sort of devolved into sort of hard to comprehend nonsense as it goes, like super cosmic, and suddenly everything that was before gets left behind. But a lot of it was also it's very easy to stumble into some ideas that I'm not big on regarding attitudes towards women and stuff like that, which can thrive in online spaces. But ultimately, yeah, and I sort of migrated towards sort of English language stuff. But a big part of it was I felt like I had something to contribute in the space that was a bit different. And that's exactly what I tried to do. Well, the actual question was how many? I have no idea. A lot.
How about the rest of you?
Well, I'm what's called a trash panda, so I've plumbed the depths of fanfiction.net and all the worst manga that anybody can find. So, yeah. Shirtaloon said, thousands. My entire childhood is basically spent on fanfiction.net and all that.
It's time well spent, I think.
I never spent time on. Oh, go ahead.
Well, I actually stumbled into it through the Russian LitRPGs, and I was getting those from my from Hoopla, the U.S. online library system, which is another great way to get free stories. But these are ostensibly edited, and that's how I first became interested. And I didn't even know Royal Road was a thing until I was already writing Dominion of Blades, which was my first LitRPG story. So I didn't get into it until late, but I do occasionally go on there and spend all night reading some random chapter. I was reading some guy in India was writing a story that had 3 views, and I can't remember the name of it. And I lost it. And it was really good. You know, you never know what you're gonna find.
Yeah, casual. I was never on fanfiction.net specifically, but as a kid, I was deep into like the Neopets forums, reading Neopets fan fiction that people were writing, and I would like load it up on my dad's computer, and I would print them out and like staple them together so I could like read them in bed, which I guess kind of like lends to my feeling today. Like I really have not read any web novels specifically, just because it's not like a format that is like, I don't know, it's just not very intuitive for my reading style. Like I don't particularly want to like read something like on my phone or on my computer or anything like that. And I think really the only one I have read is Mana Mirror by Tobias Begley, which is a pretty recent one.
Yeah, I'll say like most of my reading is audio. So I kind of came into it from the audiobook, like web serial to audiobook angle. But yeah, I'm sure if I was doing a lot of reading on my phone, I would have been starting on Royal Road more than a few years ago.
Oh, I'm starting to feel so old. When I was a kid, I had to go to the library because there wasn't really anything on the internet.
I think Neopets would have come out back in the days of dial-up internet, which makes me feel pretty ancient. Getting yammered at by my mum, get off the internet, I want to use the phone. I'm on Neopets.
Space Battles in 2003.
Stickdeath.com was a classic one.
I was listening to audiobooks and listening to Scott Sigler's novels, which were kind of like, it was like a web serial, except it was a podcast in 2003, 2004. So, yeah.
It actually kind of annoys me because I can't do audiobooks. Like, when I'm listening to them, I have to be sitting there listening to them, because if I start trying to like do, like other people are like, oh yeah, I drive to work, or oh yeah, I do this, I can't do that because my brain just tunes out half the audio.
I'm the same way. I can't focus on them as many times as I've tried.
I still find that hard to believe, casual, given that maybe this is just the algorithm for my Audible, but that's certainly how I discovered Beware of Chicken was.
Yeah, so when somebody told me that audiobooks were super popular, I was like, no, that can't be right. And then they ran me through the numbers. I was like, oh, what the hell? Because again, like I just can't listen to audiobooks. Like I've tried.
It's actually a point I wanted to raise with you all. Now, for me, correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems like both these genres, progression, fantasy, and LitRPG, are almost synonymous with audiobooks. You got Travis Baldry, and he's pretty much done every other LitRPG, prog fantasy audiobook out there. Matt, you do the Sound Booth Theatre stuff with Jeff Hayes, and obviously He Who Fights with Monsters is very, very prevalent and audible. How important do you all feel that audiobooks are to the genre?
They're super important. I mean, some genres just don't translate that great to audio. They're not really, they don't have super huge saturation on audible.com. But you look at books like Travis's book, Shirtaloon's books will be hit number one. Will White's Cradle, which is more progression fantasy, hits number one. My book hit number one on all of Audible when they came out, and it's because they're so popular. I would say just about half of my fans are audio, and as a result of that, and since I earn more from audio, large portion of my income is audio. It's pretty big, you know.
And they're doing the audio tunnel now. I think book 1's didn't release. Book 2 is coming out soon, or is out?
Well, they want to see how book 1. They're calling it audio tunnel. It's an audio drama where they have a full cast, full sound effects, all that stuff for the first Dungeon Crawler Crawl, and that's exclusive to the Sound Booth Theater platform. The first episode's free. It's pretty cool, but they're going to see how well it does before they move on to book 2.
Mm-hmm. And how have you all found your own experiences with audiobooks in this genre?
It seems like nobody got the memo about my audiobooks coming out. If the sales are any indication, but
to announce it.
yeah, there you go.
Yeah,
they're
it's
out
not
there.
like it's not an automatic route to success, but I will say, I mean, I'm a big audio listener, and most of the people I know that read the genre, like it's pretty prevalent. So I think it's kind of vital to have audiobooks. Yeah.
Yeah, and it is really great seeing like other people interpret and like perform your story. Like my audiobook, I have like dual narrators on the Jekua audiobooks because there's like a male and a female POV chapters. And so it's really great getting to see like two performers bring like this huge cast of characters to life. I think it's a really great way to experience a story.
Yeah, I too now think it's very important, especially after talking to a bunch of my friends. Like one of my friends works night shift as a janitor in the courthouse, and he's just like, "Yeah, I listened to all of Pirate Abba's The Wandering Inn over the past couple months."
I suppose that's a perfect job for an audiobook.
Yeah.
I do a lot of driving with my job, so I have like regular 3-hour windows where I can just listen to an audiobook. So I just find LitRPG and prog fantasy so easy to listen to. It lends itself so well to that format. And Shirtaloon, I'd be interested to see your own thoughts on your own audiobooks, because obviously you've had a great deal of success with Audible yourself.
Because I'm not an audiobook listener. Like, I know, I think like a lot of writers, I'm sort of in love with the written word a bit. But, oh God, that may be the single douchiest sentence I've ever said in my life. But
I'm sure you got other stuff that's douchey.
oh yeah, no, you can do worse. You can do worse. Thank you. But what I found with reader feedback is one thing that audiobooks let people do is listen together. Like, I have a lot more young readers than I ever expected to get. And a lot of that is like parents who are listening to my audiobooks with their kids. And I get that feedback about that all of the time. So that, I think, is one way in which audiobooks present opportunities for taking in the material in ways that is harder when you just got text in front of you.
I have a lot of blind fans as well that a lot, like a surprising amount.
Yeah, actually, yeah.
Too.
We've had a question from Bender, which I think is a pertinent one. Is LitRPG, especially with stats and skill trees, don't translate well into audiobooks. So do you guys use less stats just for an audiobook?
That's changing quite a bit. I think there's less pages and pages and pages of stats, like in earlier, like when I say earlier, I mean like 2016, 17 LitRPG, because that's no fun. And there's lots of those audiobooks that I just can't listen to. A lot of times what they do is they'll, like, nowadays they're smart where they'll put it as its own chapter, so it's easy to skip. Because listening to 20 minutes of somebody reading numbers doesn't.
Yeah.
Either that or they'll make the stat block sassy. So it argues with the people that it's telling the stats to.
Yeah. Because my earlier books are a lot more sort of system box heavy than my later ones. But that wasn't sort of an active choice towards audio. That was just, the way it went with the story. So, but it worked out nicely because it does make the audiobooks a lot more palatable.
I'm also interested to know, how did you each settle on your narrators? Because you all have multiple books with the same narrators following the story. It seems like a hell of a commitment for you as an author. And if this person's representing your characters, your story, I didn't even consider there'd be a blind audience. That's that's on me. I really should have. But how would you go about choosing the voice, especially for someone like like Donut and Carl in Dungeon Crawler Carl, because what Jeff did with that cat was just indescribable.
Well, for me, Jeff Hayes and I talked about him doing it while that book was still in web serial form before I even decided to make it as a book. And I made it as a book earlier than I intended because my job before this was basically going to conventions, and this was in 2020, so I suddenly had no money. And I had to get it out quickly. But he read the book and he enjoyed it, and he basically asked, "Hey, I'd really like to do this." And it's Jeff Hayes, and that's another thing with audiobooks is if you get a popular narrator like Travis Baldry, for example, people will come to you because of the narrator, not because of you, and that's really, really, really helpful. So I mean, it was a no-brainer when he expressed interest.
For me, it was getting a voice that was sort of authentically Australian. So my publisher sent me, some samples of people who'd done sort of Australian set books. And, the first two they sent me, they were, pretty decent. But then there'd just be that one word that'd be clang where they go, suddenly it's like Melbourne. Instead of Melbourne, you got those hard R's that you just don't get so much with Australians. And so they went and they actually found an Australian, even if he, is living up in Maine or somewhere. And as soon as I heard it, I'm like, no, I think that's kind of perfect. And that's how I wound up with Heath, who has been absolutely fantastic. People adore Heath.
I love Heath.
And so,
So what happened with me is originally I was going to be basically going solo before I got a good deal with Podium. So I was looking at a bunch of people. I was actually looking at Jeff Hayes, and I was going to basically fund everything myself. But then I signed with Podium, and what happened is they sent me kind of like a list with a bunch of casting stuff. And eventually, after listening to all of them, the person whose voice sounded the best was Travis's, because the other people's voices sounded slightly harsh. And the thing about Lord Chicken is, again, the kind of more relaxed kind of style of it. So Travis fit well, and Travis actually goes in and he looks at the actual Mandarin pronunciations of names and stuff, and that worked out extremely well for me. So, yeah.
Travis's performance of the first Beware of Chicken is one of my favorite audiobook performances. That's not my own book of all times.
It was very good. He knocked it out of the park with that one.
Yeah, I like self-funded 2 audiobooks of my older books, and so for that I was listening to multiple auditions for each book, and then when I finally chose somebody, I then had to listen to their performance of the entire book, making sure all the pronunciation was right and that their performances were right and things like that, and give feedback, which obviously if it's a 20-hour book, that's 20 hours I'm listening to this thing, and sometimes more if I'm going through it again. So when Podium picked up Jekua, I was very happy to be pretty hands-off on it. So I gave them some general guidance on what I wanted the narrators to sound like, because the main characters are young. They range from 18 years old to mid-20s. But besides that, I mean, Podium's Podium. They got a good reputation. So I just kind of let them do their thing, and the narrators they chose, I think, are great.
Yeah, I'm also with Podium. They gave me options. I kind of said, "Oh, I would love to get Ray Porter," and they're like, here's some other options." But honestly, I'm really happy with George Newbert. He did a great job. He's read, Todd Williams' Otherland, and he's done the voice of Superman. And he does have a lot of oomph to it. So, yeah, they gave me a list of 3, and he really stood out in his edition. So.
Yeah, Podium actually asked me if I had anyone in mind that I wanted to do it. And as I mentioned, I don't listen to audiobooks. Literally the only person I know who narrates audiobooks is Travis Baldry. So I was like, maybe him? I don't know. We did not go with him, but I got some great narrators.
I think as a reader, there is that connection between the audiobook narrator and the story themselves. But it is funny to see, you know, the different narrators crop up in different stories. Like you'd be listening to Travis Baldry reading you a story about a farm, and then all of a sudden he's voicing a crab in the latest Dungeon Crawler Crawl. You know, I love the crossover you get it in this genre. And that does bring me on to my next question for you all, is that sort of fan recognition that you all must get. You all seem to have that readership who love what you put out, but I suppose I'm not really sure what my question is, but how have you found engaging with the fans of LitRPG and prog fantasy? What have been the highlights? What's surprised you so far?
Well,
go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
I was gonna say they're all very enthusiastic. That's the biggest thing that I found. Like I've got a Discord for my for the people on Patreon, and the people like when I go on break, I get spammed with no and people screaming. And that's kind of fun, but yeah, it's just the enthusiasm and how much they enjoy what we're doing here, and it's really nice.
They can get very enthusiastic. So I've had times where like someone has asked me some incredibly like niche question about like the world building and like why I did this one thing, and I'm just like, I don't know, dude. I don't know. I don't know what answer you're looking for, and I don't have one for you.
Or the people who do like economic analysis of your work, and I'm just like,
Yeah, some of them are thinking so deeply about things that like, I don't know why I would ever think of that.
I love that, honestly. Yeah, I've had like, you know, I like consulted an astrophysicist for mine, and I'm just waiting. That part hasn't come up in the book series yet, but I'm waiting for the audience reaction there. There's definitely some engineer types that know a lot more about it than I do.
Like I got like an 8-page thing of like how ancient Chinese currency systems worked, and I was like, "Thank you very much. That was very helpful."
Yeah, there's so much passion, and they love to deep dive into, you know, elements of the system. Like I've got channels on my Discord that are probably the busiest that I have, that is just people, you know, sort of theory crafting the system, and yeah. And yeah, the investment and the drive is incredible.
Yeah, these stories they lend themselves to people talking about them, as opposed to say like a straight sweet romance, which is more popular with more readers.
Yeah.
But you read it and there's no mystery to the world, there's no mystery to the system, and when you're done with it, you can say I like that book and then go on to the next one. Whereas in these stories, people reread them, they get into it, they meet other fans who've also into it, and then they start talking and talking and talking and talking, and that's one of the great things about these worlds we're creating. They're almost like games, you know, because they have game like worlds, and the fans, they become friends with each other. And then I go to convention, like I said before, I used to sell art for a living, so I would go to conventions and sell my art. And now I still do that, but you know, I sell my books. So I meet, and the first time I had someone that walked up to me dressed as Carl, I was like, holy shit, you know, it's the most amazing thing in the world. People really get into this stuff, like really, and some of them are crazy. It's like some of them are really crazy, but it's like we're creating communities with our stories, and that's my favorite part about all of this.
Yeah, you talking about the cosplay reminded me. My favorite thing since starting the series is that the main character has a Jekua called a Pufflin. It's essentially his starter Pokemon, and somebody got a tattoo of the Pufflin, which is really rad.
Have any of you ever had any fan tattoos yourselves, or is this the first one here?
Somebody got a
Yeah.
Yeah. There's a few.
Yeah, I've seen some tattoos. And the first time I was at Dragon Con signing books, and this couple came up to me with that look. It was like, oh, look, it's baby Jason. I'm like, no. And they said, yes. And I'm like, oh, I'm glad I didn't name him Gumpert.
I'll get a Shirtaloon tattoo if you get a Matt tattoo.
I don't have a tattoo, but yeah.
I'll pay for
I'd
it.
be up for that.
All right. You heard it here.
Yeah.
Oh god, we're gonna have to do
Another
something
exclusive TBRCon.
You need a big resplendent rooster on your back so that when people see it, they can say nice cock.
You could recreate the Hazabushi versus Biddy fight on your back.
That sounds like regret. Waiting not very long to happen.
It's not worth doing if there isn't a possibility of regret afterwards.
Speaking of, Matt, I have to ask, has Jeff got the donut tattoo on his ass?
No, he's being a big wuss about it. So if you don't know, Jeff Hayes said if we get X number of people on the stream while he's recording the previous Dungeon Crawler Carl audiobook, he'll get a Donut the cat character tattooed on his own butt. And I went to Twitter, I went to my Facebook, I'm like, everybody. And then we had like well more than enough people before the stream even started. So he owes the world a donut tattoo, and he's been he doesn't have any tattoos. He's terrified. He's dragging his feet. He's like, well, we got to find the right artist and the right art. And I'm like, no. So, we'll get it done.
And I think that just highlights the fan interaction all of you have, and especially nowadays, I suppose in many ways it's a great time to be an author. Is you have the platforms to do it. You've got Discord, you've got Elon Musk, whatever he wants to call it nowadays, Twitter, formerly known as X, MySpace, what have you. But things like Patreon, Royal Road as well. How important is it to you, the author, to have that platform to interact with your readers?
Well, it's super important for me because I don't really spend money on advertising. I have Patreon, and then there's the subreddit, which is fairly popular. And then there's Facebook. And that's another good thing about this genre is everyone gathers. They talk about the books, whether you're there or not, whether you want them to or not. Yeah. So it's important for me personally that I don't have a PR agent. I haven't, I need to have my ear on my thumb on the pulse, I guess, of the community. So it's crucial for them to me be aware of where they're gathering and how they're talking about it. So I can, when I have a new book, I can announce it. And that's one advantage we all have in this genre is people talk and talk. Like we were saying earlier, they talk and talk and talk and talk. So when a new book comes out and someone really likes it, the word of mouth in this genre is super, super important to everyone's careers, basically. Mm-hmm. So yes, it's important.
Like the whole genre is very much an online facilitated genre. Like these are communities that couldn't really form more than about 30 years. Basically the internet made all of this possible. I don't know about you guys, but I do not sell a lot of physical copies of books. I'm halfway convinced that I've signed most of the physical copies that exist. So. And that is all about community. It's because it's not about book tours and mainstream advertising. It really is about having a presence in those communities, and then they will find what they like and they will spread it. And that's what our entire genre is built.
Mm-hmm. And Abby, what's your own experience been like?
Yeah, I mean, I'm really glad I got on Royal Road. I started serializing it on Wattpad before Royal Road, and I did get some good engagement there, but it wasn't quite my audience. So, like I had a really great experience on Royal Road with, I still get a lot of comments. And I have a Discord and a Patreon, and I do what I can. I mean, I have a much smaller audience than some of the people here, but it's still pretty awesome. I love it. Yeah.
And Travis Riddle and Casual, what about your own experiences in these sort of platforms?
I'm kind of with Matt, where I'm not really paying for any advertising or anything, possibly to my own detriment, but that's why it is really important to kind of engage with those communities. And I think also just like readers, like I know me personally, like if I interact with a writer or something online who I'm a fan of, like it's exciting and fun, and I don't know, people like when you're down there with them, participating in the same conversations that they are.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. The accessibility is a huge draw.
Yeah, pretty much everything's been said. It's just like, yeah, the internet has been very kind to me.
I suppose the other main one now is Kickstarter. It seems we're in this phase where it's the time of the special editions. Matt, you just closed one, which cost me a lot of money, so thanks for that.
Thank you.
But again, I suppose it's that interaction, is that you all have that audience out there, and you're now at a point where you can get that engagement, you can reach out to the community, and people are interested in this sort of thing. And that does bring me on to possibly going to be our final topic, because we're running out of time, believe it or not, is what do you all see coming next for yourselves, for your genre? And Casual, let's start with you this time.
What do I see coming next? I see it just keep on keeping on right now. Just continue telling the story that I want to tell, and as people enjoy it. I do have an end plan for Beware of Chicken, but we're not quite there yet. And as for the rest of the genre, I think that it's in a pretty great place right now, and I think it's going to continue to grow.
We've had one suggestion in the comments for you, Casual, and that's Beware of Chicken plushies.
I would buy the shit out of that, just telling you.
Yeah. We are actually currently like looking around and doing some stuff with that. So hopefully soon.
Okay. You've heard it here first on TBRCon. Beware of Chicken plushies are going to be a thing.
And possibly chunky planters.
Chunky is my favorite.
Oh my goodness. I suppose the peepar ones would just swallow the entire plant. So yeah, chunky makes sense. Abby, how about yourself?
Yeah, I mean, so the Torth series is all pre-written, so I'm working on another series at this point, and it's fantasy rather than sci-fi and single point of view, so we'll see how that goes. But I just like the freedom to just keep experimenting. I love that idea of a platform and all that. And where the actual genre is going, I do think it's just going to keep growing. I mean, I think honestly, Dungeon Crawler Carl, like I heard normies talking about that in my book club. So, yeah. So yeah, I mean, I think once it starts to hit mainstream, and I think it has started to cross over a little into mainstream, just a little bit. Once there's like a major hit movie or something or TV show, then I think that's when you'll start to see it like just flood.
And I think we all know it's going to be Carl.
Might be.
I don't know. Sure, we have the same lawyer, so.
I would watch the majority movie. I can see the Wachowskis doing something with that, possibly. And Shirtaloon, what about yourself?
I think for the genre, I like where the genre is heading at the moment. Like, especially coming from like the web serial space where I started out, like maybe 4 or 5 years ago. You got attention with sort of raw quantity. Like that's how I sort of broke through, with just sort of flooding out chapters. But I think as it's built over the last few years, we're now at a stage where it's quality that's making you stand out more and more. Like just throwing out numbers isn't enough anymore. Now, it's people are filtering through for the good stuff, and I think that is fantastic for the genre. But I also think it's going to take, a breakout to really sort of make it explode. Once I don't have to explain to, everyone I meet what LitRPG is, I think that's going to be huge.
I suppose it can be hard, John, to recommend to someone who hasn't read a book.
It's also like a lot of it's quite niche. Like, there are series that are very, very popular within the genre, but their focus on like stats and numbers and ongoing sequences of combat is appeals to very specific audiences, and I think some of those will have harder times breaking out of like the sort of core audience. So so I could see there being more of a move away from like absolute pure sort of LitRPG that's like all stats and all combat, and I could see people trying to broaden the appeal. Because the thing is, we keep calling LitRPG and progression a genre, and it's not exactly that. Like, it is, but it's also in a lot of ways an overlay for other genres, because it's a fantasy book that's a LitRPG, it's a science fiction that's a LitRPG, and I'm probably getting yelled at in Reddit right this second, but that is not anything new for me. So, so I think it occupies sort of an odd place where like it coexists with various other genres. Because if you look at some of the like the webtoony stuff coming out of Korea and whatnot, they've got these elements that are being applied to wildly different genres, like just sort of a business drama with stats and that sort of thing. So it's sort of a fantasy element on that, and I think that's very fun. I think that has lots and lots of possibilities for sort of expanding what LitRPG is. But there's still sort of boundaries that we need to break through.
Yeah, I think it's a great point that you made, that you can take any genre, if you like, and add those elements of LitRPG or progression to it. Can't remember the author, but there's a dice rolling LitRPG which is like a Viking revenge story. That's gonna annoy me.
I will point out though that I don't like the idea of just taking anything and throwing in stats just so it's LitRPG. I think if it's not incorporated into the narrative as an important element, like if you can take out your stats, you probably should. But
yeah, I listened to one audio recently where all the stats, it was deck building LitRPG, and all the stats of the cards were an index at the end, which I listened to an audiobook, and that was a slog. So I get exactly what you mean there.
There's a lot of those out there. People take their fantasy novel they wrote in 2005 and rejigging them with stats, and you can always tell.
Oh, we're going to I love
it. And Travis Riddle, how about yourself?
I think to kind of jump off of what Shirt was saying, and to probably get me yelled at on Reddit also, is I feel like a lot of times on there I see people requesting books, like they're kind of just requesting stuff that's like a lot of the same kind of characters that they've already read and kind of the same tropes that they've already read and stuff like that. And like looking like just on this panel, like all of our series are very different from each other, and so I think I would hope that going forward there's kind of a continuation of like very unique and like varied stories, and with authors experimenting with like new types of settings or like new character dynamics, new even like structures of narrative, if that's what they want to do. Yeah, I think it'd be cool to just, like Shirt was saying, just like new approaches to stories, but like with these core elements in there. Yeah, that's what I hope going forward we will see.
And to round us off, Matt, how about yourself?
Yeah, well, first off, Shirt, you'd like Eric Uglin, the guy who writes the Good Guys, the Bad Guys series. He is very adamant on your point that LitRPG is not a genre. It's, I don't know, like it's like a spice you would add to food, you know, salsa. I mean, some things need salsa, and some things you can't just throw salsa and clam chowder and expect it to. But anyway, where's the genre going? If we call it a genre, I agree that I used to think it was gonna like poof out like a star that burned too bright, and I don't really think that anymore. I think we're starting to see it leaking into other things. We have the web comics that are coming out. We're gonna be seeing comics. We're gonna be seeing there's like the anime from Solo Leveling, and I suspect we'll be seeing more stuff like that. And then maybe live action television shows or movies based on new stuff or existing stuff, and people are going to start to see it more. And there's lots of, mainstream readers like outside of just the LitRPG communities that are talking about some of these books. And that's really leading them to other books that are like this. And I think we're going to see the next 2 or 3 years, we're going to see some more expansion before who knows what's going to happen next. But again, like everyone else is saying, just a couple years ago, you could just try this as a LitRPG on a book, release it, and then suddenly you're selling, a bunch of copies, whether the book is good or not, or it was irrelevant at the time. And now the books were finally, thankfully, at the point where the books do need to be good for people to actually be successful, because we are just getting like fire hosed in the face with like new releases every day. And so I'm looking forward to it.
It is an important point to make, and I feel that early on with LitRPG and with prog fantasy, there was an element of you really need to read this one, but ignore everything else because you won't get into it. Whereas now that quality is starting to come through because the genre is growing, because that barrier has been taken away. More and more people are actually seeing that these books are really damn good. And you still sort of see it now. People will say, I've heard about this RPG book, but I'm worried it's just going to be a grind. I'm not going to enjoy it. And there's less and less the element of having to explain what it is. Now it's just, this is a kick-ass book. You need to read it. We are almost out of time, so I thought we'd just round off. We'll start with you, Matt, because we're still really on you. Just remind us, what book should our audience add to their TBRs? One of yours and another of the genre that you'd recommend. And also where we can follow you online. So after you, Matt.
My website doesn't really exist, but if you go to mattdinniman.com, it'll take you straight to my Amazon page, which has all my books. So my book that you should read is probably Dungeon Crawler Carl. That's the book that people talk about when they talk about me. I read tons and tons and tons of these books. The most recent ones I read, there's 2 that I'll recommend. Brad the Impaler by Paul Sading just came out. It's a funny, guy running around with his chihuahua. And then there's All the Skills by Honor Ray, which is one of my favorite books of the past year. Fantastic. Book 3, it's about to come out in March, I think. And thanks for having me.
More than welcome. Yeah, All the Skills were just nailed the deck building. Like it wasn't too much, but it was just enough. But it's nice little story at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, thank you, Matt. Travis Riddle.
Yeah, I've got 4 Jekua books out so far that you can get on Amazon. The first one is On Lavender Tides. Books 5 and 6, the last ones, will be out in March and September of this year. They're already written and everything, so they're for sure coming out. You can find me on Twitter and Instagram at TravisWantEat is my username. And as for another book in the genre, one of my favorites that I feel like is pretty underread at the moment is Lightblade by Zamil Akhtar, which actually was in our opening animation on this panel. But yeah, I think it's his world building in that one is like super unique and like very different from other books I've read in this genre and just in fantasy in general. It's very much like a science fantasy type of thing, but with like Middle Eastern influences. And I don't know, the plot just continually went in directions that I never expected. I did not ever know what was about to happen, which was very fun to me. So definitely check that one out.
Fantastic. Thanks, Travis. And other Travis Shirtaloon.
He Who Fights with Monsters is the only thing I've written because I don't have time to write anything else at the moment. But yeah, start with book 1. That's not hard to figure out. As for a recommendation, I've been trying to find more sort of sci-fi LitRPG. Yeah, one of the ones I've really enjoyed is Titan Hoppers by Rob J. Hayes. I think the world building in that is absolutely fascinating, which is why I'm quite compelled by that series.
Brilliant. And thank you for joining us today. And Abby.
Yeah, so you can find me at abbygoldsmith.com, and first book is Majority, and the second book is out as well, and the rest of it will be coming out this year and the next year. So what I would recommend, I was going to say All the Skills, but you guys already said it.
Sorry.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm going to recommend one that's kind of, I don't think it's been ported over officially as any kind of a book or an audiobook yet, but The Nature of Predators, which has been kind of blowing up on the subreddit HFY. So it's kind of like, it's military sci-fi, but unlike any that I've ever read before. And just, it's got some really incisive social critiques and all that. I'm really enjoying it. So, yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Abby. And last of all, Casualfarmer.
Yeah, you can find Beware of Chicken, book 1 through 3 on Amazon. And book 4 is done at the editor, and I'm currently writing book 5. As for recommendations, I would say, of course, the classic of The Wandering Inn by Paradaba and Beneath the Dragon Eye Moons by Selkie Myth. To my friends.
And thank you for joining us. Well, that will conclude our panel. A huge thank you to Matt, Travis, Abby, and Casual. It's been great hosting this chat with you guys. Thank you for all of your insights. I'm Tom Bookbeard. If you want to, you can listen to my podcast on Sunday on TBRCon. I'm part of the 4 Beardsmen of the Book Apocalypse. We've got a special guest, a debut author, Alex Valdier, talking about A Wolf in Space, so don't miss it. But thank you all so much for watching. Thank you, everyone in the comments. Thank you to the authors, and everyone enjoy the rest of your days. Thank you so much for tuning in.
Bye.